So welcome to this episode of the HRD Talks, where we talk with HR directors and people directors about their journey into HR, get their insight into current trends in the world of work, and take their advice on the future of HR and how HR professionals can deliver value and progress their careers. Today, I'm very, very pleased to welcome Kim Knight, who's Deputy Chief People Officer at Coventry University. Welcome, Kim.
Hello.
I've been trying to get Kim on the podcast for a little while, mainly because other people were saying, you've got to get Kim on. And I was like, I know Kim. I've worked with Kim for a while. It would be great to have her on, and we're finally here. So thank you so much for giving up your time and coming on.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me, Nick.
Cool. So do you want to explain a bit about you and who you are and what you do at Coventry?
Yeah. So I've been at Coventry now for just about a couple of years. A new sector for me, actually, higher education, something that I had never thought about. Quite interesting to try something a bit different. And previous to that, I worked mainly in retail, FMCG retail. So yeah, very different change for me. But actually, when you work with people, there are similarities wherever you are, as I have found out quite quickly.
Yeah. And take us through your kind of journey into HR. Did you start in HR to begin with? Was it something different? How did that go?
Yeah, so I didn't actually know what HR was, I'm going to be really honest. I don't remember ever being spoken to about, in those days, personnel at school. So I fell into personnel at Sainsbury's. And from there, I was able to do my CIPD and progress from there. So I started off at Sainsbury's and worked my way up, did various personnel manager positions in store, and then went to a regional position and was there for a good 10 years or so. And then obviously it is time to move on. And I went to a company called ATS Euromaster, which is part of Michelin. It is the retail side. And I started off in their call centre and also looked after their shared service centre. And actually, it was where I got my first HRD position. Not something I'd set out for. It was a nice surprise when it happened. I remember thinking, what, me? And yes, it was me. So that's my first break. And I think, I look back fondly on that time. Yeah. But all good things, you need to come to an end and you progress. And I went to Boots, although not in the UK. I was on the international side and based in Nottingham. But also I spent time, I spent a couple of years in the US in New York, and also covered Southeast Asia mainly. So that was obviously a great experience. And that's where my international HR career really developed from there. And then I came back and, having had that international kind of touch and being very independent, I suppose, based in the US, I was looking for my next opportunity and went to Northgate Vehicle Hire, which was a standalone kind of HR role in terms of into the board, etc. Yep. So that was a great kind of, it was good to kind of take my skills somewhere else and see that I could do it. And then I went to a company called Loomis, which is a payment solution business. I don't want to say cash because it's more than just cash now. And that was their first HRD role there. And it's a Swedish company, international. And I really enjoyed my time there setting up the HR function. And then that brings me to Coventry, which was when I decided I wanted to do something a little bit different, and I'm now at Coventry.
Yeah, so tell us more about Coventry Uni then. What's your role involved? What do they get up to? I appreciate they're a university and most people will know, but my experience with universities is they tend to be a bit more complicated than you might think.
Exactly, they are. And I was I setting out to go into higher education? Absolutely not. And I don't think my personality type, anyone who knows me, I think was a bit surprised when they heard I was moving into that sector, if I'm honest with you. But I think Coventry is a little bit different. I don't think every university would suit someone like myself. But Coventry is quite a commercial organisation. Yeah. And actually, we all have a list, don't we, when we look for a new job? And Coventry did not tick on my list because I was looking back to being, an HRD in a company. And this is a number 2 role. But I think I had the good sense to understand that I was in a new sector, and actually having somebody that understood the sector was really important. So I think, getting that right boss that you report into. So it was the first HR reporting line I'd had, I think, since my Sainsbury's days. Okay. Or maybe in Boots, actually, I had one HR person I reported into directly. So it's a deputy role and essentially looks after the whole of the HR function apart from partnering. So partnering sits under the CPO, and I look after all the other parts that traditionally sit under HR, which I don't need to explain because presumably HR people are listening to this podcast, so hopefully they understand what that means.
Idea.
Exactly right.
Yeah, interesting. And what about the university itself? does it focus on particular areas, have a presence outside of Coventry? Or
Absolutely. I mean, I think we've got more students now outside of Coventry than actually in Coventry. So we've got campuses across the UK, Scarborough, and in London. London campus is doing particularly well. And then we have got branded campuses in India, Kazakhstan, quite a few places internationally. So Coventry's ambition is to be a global education group. It's not just about being a university. And it's about how do you connect people when they're at college and get that kind of straight entry into, if they want to go into a university setting. We also do apprentices as well. So I think Coventry is very forward looking. I mean, I'm sure people have seen in the news recently about Kent and Greenwich and the super university. Well, actually, Coventry, in terms of its kind of scope and breadth in terms of its delivery, has been on that journey for a while in terms of its offering. So it's a very commercial place, and I think quite different in terms of how it does things compared to some other universities.
Yeah. And Kim, obviously the sector itself has had a pretty rough time recently. That's probably a bit of an understatement. How has that kind of impacted you guys and the people agenda?
Yeah, of course. I think with some of the changes to, especially international students and their ability to come into the UK, and also looking whether an attractive place for them to come if they're choosing an international university to go to, has meant that we ultimately do have less students. We've got less students in the UK entering university, and we have got less international students. So the impact is, of course, that we have to be able to right-size an organisation to match the new demands. What that means from an HR agenda is, of course, working alongside the organisation to make sure we've got the right people in the right place. And that's unsettling wherever you are. And it is particularly unsettling, I think, in a sector that traditionally hasn't had to go through what we're all going through at the moment. So I think it's a time of kind of reflection, an enormous amount of change, not just in terms of how we deliver the education to people, the models that we deliver, the expansion internationally that someone like Coventry is doing. So it's changed from all angles, and I think that causes unrest with people, of course.
And I guess that's not limited to the education sector. Things like AI are obviously having massive kind of disruptive impact on lots of different sectors. How are you seeing that at your place? Yeah,
well, I suppose I could talk about AI in two angles. One is it affects the teaching and it affects things with the students and how they use AI. But I think specifically now, I think what I'm seeing in the workplace is you're seeing those that are the early adopters and are curious and starting to explore. And you're seeing those that just don't know an awful lot at all. And I think working in an education sector, I sometimes get the feeling people think we're going to just teach them all of this stuff. We're going to sit down and show them all this new AI stuff.
Okay.
And as I've been talking a lot now is it will evolve too quickly to teach. People have got to have a curiosity to start having a look at it.
Yeah.
So I think what we're seeing now is what I think are the not concerns for me, but I think they will impact HR, is I think we will see performance starting to separate with people, and you'll see output being quicker and maybe better, don't know, question mark, with people using AI to help them. Those that aren't using AI, and managers thinking, well, how come that person has whacked out a bunch of policies for me in a couple of days and this person's taken 4 weeks to do something, and before you know it, there's going to be performance conversations because people aren't being able to do things at the same speed as each other. So I think there is still a long way to go with getting people to understand the impact of AI in the workplace, and I think we're going to start seeing more and more separation. And I think for me, we've all got, and it's not just an HR responsibility. I think there's a responsibility in terms of how we're going to use it and how we're going to keep people up to date with it in their own disciplines.
Yeah. And then do you think one of the other areas that, we often talk about is well-being and mental health and that kind of thing, and burnout, is quite a common phrase at the minute, isn't it? Do you think AI will have an impact on that? Should it allow us to be more productive and not have to work quite as hard?
I think other things will fill our time quite quickly. I mean, I remember when I think, we started thinking email and things like that would, make things quicker and save us time. And what we're finding is we seem to fill our time, don't we? So I think other things will take over. I mean, I think there is a desire continually for this work-life balance. Possibly more so now. You see now with the flexible working and the hybrid working, you're seeing people want more time, but we're also working in a world that is so fast changing and so rapid, and business is under such pressure for productivity and output. I don't think AI is it will mean time is released to do other stuff, but I don't think it's going to give people time back to do particularly the stuff that they want to do outside of the workplace particularly. I don't think so.
Yeah, makes sense. And you're right, that kind of economic pressure to do more and to produce more or sell more or whatever it might be is likely to always be there, isn't it, for a lot of organisations?
It is. And I think, that difficult times, isn't it? And people will think, what can I do more for less? So if I need less people, I need less people. I mean, I know it's a really hard kind of message to hear. So it's about transferring those skills somewhere else. And I think that's one of our big challenges in terms of how do we think about the skills that we need in the workplace, not particularly just the jobs that we need. I think skills will be the new currency, and we will need to look at that skill-based requirement. I still think we're a long way from that. I think as an HR teams, I think we're so caught up in reorganisations and other things at the moment that we're just not getting that thinking space. But skills is going to be a massive thing. And how do we make sure people have got those skills to take us into the future? Well, I'm saying the future. I think we're kind of here now.
The future is now.
Yeah, I do think so.
Yeah. So, and what's your kind of take on how you best prepare for that?
Well, I think we've got to work alongside business leaders to understand what they're trying to deliver. It's interesting because even AI, I'm just about to put an AI skills audit into just the people team, just to understand where people's thinking is, what their skills are, where they think they're at. And I think it's just about understanding the business you're in, what skills are going to be required there. And when I say skills, I don't just mean technical skills. I think the soft skills in terms of working in ambiguity, working in terms of, flexibly, are going to be absolutely critical. And people will say they do that now, but I still do see people who kind of want to know all the facts, all the answers before they can do something. And I just don't think we're in a world to do that. So I think there is something about, and it isn't just, I don't think, at the workplace. I think there's a responsibility in education, parenting, in terms of helping people navigate through. There's not a straight road somewhere, and you have to be able to flex those muscles and move accordingly. Makes sense.
And then we've talked a bit already in a number of ways about productivity and how HR impacts on that. It was interesting. Just this week, there was an article in one of the major newspapers about the fact, well, essentially the author was blaming HR pretty much for the productivity problem that we have in the UK, and saying that it was kind of ruining business efficiency and productivity and even people's lives. It was quite full on. What's your kind of take on that?
Well, I haven't seen the article,
Yep.
But I think, HR is always the best one to blame, isn't it, when things have to happen? And we can be in places where line managers sit behind HR quite comfortably. But I think HR, the workplace reflects what's going on in society, in my view. And there are, we are in a position now in our workplace where we've got different generations in the workplace, and we have got different expectations. And I'm guessing the person who wrote the Times article will be of a certain generation. I don't know, but I'm going to guess so. But the reality is, if you're some generations and some people are going to value different things. And I think HR's role is to make sure there's a workplace that people want to be part of. Some of that includes a focus on kind of well-being, and some of that focuses on kind of career progression and things. And I think the businesses that will do best is when you've got engaged employees, regardless of what's been delivered by HR. So I think to blame HR, I think HR is just reflecting what the business requires and also what's happening more generally. I don't think it's HR's fault. HR don't put these things in without there being a demand for it. And suppliers don't, put platforms together without there being a demand for things as well. So I think it's a provocative statement, I guess, in the Times, but I don't think it's right.
Yeah, and I guess that generational difference in terms of expectations in the workplace is always interesting to me, because we have probably the widest range of ages working together, in workplaces at the minute. How do you see that? Is that because a lot of people make lots of that? Other people think, well, no, they're all still people, and actually the basic requirements of a person are, fairly similar. Do you see differences there, or is it not so much of a thing?
I can argue it both ways depending on the mood I'm in, I think. So I'll try and give both views today. I think sometimes it is nothing about the generation at all. I think it's about where you are in your life in terms of, if you've got young children, whether you're in your 20s or your 50s, that's what's going to be kind of dictating what you want. But sometimes it is about certain generations are going to, or certain people. I think probably you're right. We should move away from the whole idea of just talking about generations, because I think that pigeonholes people a little bit too much. But I think requirements do change. What I want now compared to what I wanted in my 20s are different. Yep. In my 20s, my pension was a pain in the neck. I didn't understand why I would even want to think about it. Now I'm obsessed by it. That's all I can think about. So I think we are all people, and I think we can all work together. But I think we do have to not make too big a deal out of it, but we have to understand it as well. And I think, especially if we've got an ageing workforce and we want to perhaps bring people into an organisation, people's learning pace may be different. But don't just pigeon it. There will be people, and it's nothing to do with the generation they're in. But, I think there are, medically, we will change. Scientifically, we change, don't we, as we get older? Yeah. And I think we have to just be cognizant of it, really. Yeah,
makes sense. And then one of the other things that we talk about on the podcast is advice to the profession. You've done a number of jobs, been around a little while in the world of HR. In terms of, if you were restarting your career again, or you were giving advice to someone who was at that place, what would your suggestion be? And you can't say don't go into HR, because I've had other guests say that.
No, I love HR. I've never regretted it at all. I mean, I think ultimately what I would say to somebody is you've got to love what you do. Do not chase a title. Do not try and just, I'm doing the do nots now, aren't I? That's so typical, isn't it? So love what you do. Be curious about it. And I think now, if I was saying to somebody, you might change your mind. You might do it for a bit and you might want to move into something else. I don't think HR is about, I love people and that's why I want to be in HR. I can honestly say, I mean, I like people, but I like people no more or less than the finance director. Yeah. So the biggest thing is, going back to just do something because you want to do it, not because you think you have an impression of what it will be and give you. And then if you enjoy it, you'll be good at it and you'll progress well, and every day will not feel like a work day for you.
Yeah. And then what about the top job, progression to the top job? You've obviously done a number of those kind of senior roles. What about people that are either new to that or looking to move into that kind of role?
Again, I think for me, I never set out to be an HR director. And I think it's about being good at the job you're doing, having an eye on the future, but upping your skills, making sure you know what's going on. But I think the big thing for me is you've got to be prepared to say what you think and use your voice, because you are in a very privileged position to represent the general workforce and make sure that lens is being considered by an organisation, which means you might have to be uncomfortable with saying some uncomfortable truths. So you're going to have things to say that people are not going to like. Doesn't mean they're going to listen, but I think you need to feel that you have had that conversation. I think for me, the relationships you have is key. So especially as you move up, it's not about just your technical ability. You'll have you'll have a good team around you. The first thing you'll do, I think, is put a great team in place. I've always got a great team of people. But what you've got to be able to do, especially as you move on to the more senior roles, is build those relationships and be able to influence people when you need to. And ultimately, what I would say to people is, you know what? your career and moving up is it's a marathon. It's not a sprint, and you will have highs and you will have lows. And it might not be a linear line to the top, and that's okay. And actually, I think that's going to be more and more of the case. So be prepared to navigate through that and move. And actually, you can get a bit of line experience outside of HR. Do that, because don't be the kind of policy police and the kind of this is what HR say kind of person. You need to speak the business language, and you might need that little bit of experience outside of HR.
And then one final thing that I was going to ask you about, obviously you mentioned that you'd shifted sectors into something quite new, quite different to retail. How do you navigate that? Is it really that? I know people issues are people issues, but there are differences between sectors. How have you found that? How would you kind of recommend people manage that kind of change if they're moving into a different area? Because again, lots of the recruitment stories I hear at the minute is that employers are recruiting for sector experience only, and people are getting discounted very regularly for not having sector experience in the particular sector that employer operates, which always seems a bit short-sighted to me. But what do you think?
I think it is challenging depending on the sector you're moving to. I mean, something like the HE sector is so different to what I've done before. So I think it's the spirit of what you enter into it with as well. So, with a curious mind, not forgetting what you know and holding true to that, but also you need to try and learn that organisation you're going into. So I think it is possible, but of course it's possible to change sectors. Of course it is. But it does take a little bit of time to learn that new organisation or that new sector. The people issues are the people issues. I mean, there's no doubt about it. But you do need to get the context and the history to understand why things might be done slightly different. Because it's interesting, isn't it? Every sector we say, or every organisation has its own nuances. So I think as long as you're entering a sector where you think your personality type will fit. So if you're somebody who likes kind of rules and process, you're not going to go to some kind of, Google or something where you're kind of
startup.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
So as long as you kind of know the culture, I think that for me, that's the bit. It's not the sector. So when I went to join Coventry, my big thing was what kind of culture am I joining and who are the people I'm going to be working with and ultimately who is my boss. And if I think I can work with them, the sector isn't the concern. That will happen because I'm working with people I can do that with. Yeah. And that's absolutely stood true for me. I work with a great individual who's had patience with me, who's helped me navigate it. And I'm still, when I see something I think, I have a view on, I feel quite comfortable to say that. And I don't feel stifled. And therefore, then you give your best. So, yeah, I think it's know the culture and know your boss. And then the sector bit will be fine. Yeah,
that makes sense. Okay, so I think we are nearing the end of our time together. Any kind of final words for the HR profession in general, Kim? It's not easy out there at the minute for a lot of people.
No, it isn't easy, and I don't think it's easy in any roles at the moment. I think HR has a really important part to play in any organisation. At the end of the day, the real point of difference will always be the people. Whether it's people because they're inventing the brand or making the brand or the product, people are what are the engine of any organisation. And I think anybody who wants to enter the HR profession, I think as long as they're keeping their skills up to date with what's going on with things like AI and the legislation, but also are the kind of individuals that are flexible and can work with different kinds of people, I think it's a really good place to be. I don't think HR is going anywhere for whatever reason. I mean, even when I started out in HR's always had, not a bad press, but there's always been this kind of slightly eye roll up moment about HR. But it's interesting, isn't it? As we know in HR, when things are really needed, let's talk COVID. HR and finance were the two functions there driving and making sure that organisations were making decisions that meant that business could survive. So don't be disheartened by what's currently happening. We're going through a phase at the moment in terms of business performance and what HR is focusing on. But I think actually with a more complex world, a more complex demographic and mix of people working, with more requirements and demands than ever, because you can't just be hierarchical about things. There will be an absolute place for star HR to be there working alongside people and helping businesses be the best they can. So don't give up, people.
I love that. Star HR is a good way to finish, isn't it? Well, Kim, thank you so much for joining me on this episode. I'm sure people will really enjoy it. Some great advice, some great thoughts on, the state of the profession at the minute. For those that are listening on their favourite podcast provider, please do like, follow, rate, subscribe, whatever your provider allows. That will help visibility on the podcast. And Kim, thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the HRD Talks podcast. Hopefully you found the discussion helpful. If so, please follow us on your podcast provider to be notified of future episodes and share with friends and colleagues. For more information on the podcast, please visit actons.co.uk/the HRD Talks.